Did you know the most popular format for playing Magic the Gathering was created by fans way back in 1996? That's right, Commander, or as it was known back then, Elder Dragon Highlander, is a format where a single legendary general is chosen to lead the army of the other 99 cards in your deck. The singleton format, where there can only be one, helped differentiate itself from standard Magic where 4 copies of a card could be played in a single deck. You probably already know this, but you might be left wondering, what would a competitive EDH deck look like back in 1996? Magic was only 3 years old then. That doesn't exactly leave a lot of room for a huge format like Commander. But what did happen before 1996 was the release of the Legends expansion, where new multicolor creatures appeared and helped define the series as it evolved. 5 of these creatures would be the original Elder Dragon Legends: Arcades Sabbath, Chromium, Nicol Bolas, Vivictus Asmati, and Palladium Moors. Traditionally, to play Elder Dragon Highlander, you would select one of these 5 beasts to headline your deck, reflecting their respective 3 color combinations. Though life was decided to be double a normal game of Magic, fans also decided that 3 direct hits from one of these massive Elder Dragons should be enough to put any player under and win the game. So each dragon is a 7/7. So 7 times 3 brought us to the 21 lethal commander damage as we know it today. Now that's all well and good for a history lesson, but what was the game actually like back then? Most of those original cards are pricey vintage collector items and aren't accessible at all. Even though Magic is a historic paper card game, Wizards of the Coast instead prefers to inflate its secondhand market instead of allowing us all equal opportunity to sit down and play. I can still go out and purchase a copy of unbranded Monopoly instead of being forced into Mario Monopoly, or Pokemon Labyrinth versus just regular Labyrinth. But unfortunately, Magic does not work this way, so we can only imagine what the game might have been like back in 1996. Nah, screw that. I decided to comb through every single card from 1993 to 1996 and build a modular commander deck that could use any of the original 5 Elder Dragons by interchanging 5 stacks of color-specific cards and shuffling the required 3 stacks together. On top of some added artifacts and interchangeable multicolor legends, this massive 180 card stack finally is ready to get printed into proxies. So keep in mind that these are all made with the intent to be educational and fun, but not for resale. And with that all out of the way, let's begin. I call this deck Party Like It's 1996. We don't have too many cards to choose from for starters. Laying it all out there, we have access to the original Alpha, Arabian Nights, Antiquities, Legends, The Dark, Fallen Empires, Ice Age, Homelands, Alliances, and Mirage. These old sets were generally small and had some notoriously horrible cards. Seriously, go read some of these sets, you will be appalled. Finding enough cards to make a cohesive deck is out of the question, so instead I turned my sights on building to the strength of each color as best as I could from across all of these sets. And since this deck is modular, that means that all 5 colors need to pull their weight. But first, let's talk about our commanders. The original 5 Elder Dragons. Old Magic had a hard-on for downsides on big creatures. Each Elder Dragon is an 8-mana 7/7 flyer with an ability that is unique to themselves. Even though those mana costs are outrageous by today's standards, the real downsides here are the 3-color upkeep costs. If you don't pay, your commander dies. I swear, if you thought that old Magic cards were overpowered because of the Power 9, think again. We're gonna need to pull out all the stops if we have any hope of making this deck work. Let's start with the basics and begin with the white cards. Armageddon is emergency land destruction, pure and simple. Old Magic loved resource denial, and it might be one of our only ways to compete with modern decks. Balance, alternatively, could force much faster decks to chunk back down to our puny scale. This sucker's banned for a reason. But it's 1996. What's a ban list? Holy Day can save us from a devastating turn for a single plains. Kismet basically puts us a turn ahead of the opponent, making their permanents enter tapped. Land tax is kind of reverse balance for land, letting us quickly play catch-up to ramp decks. Moat simply prevents non-flying creatures from attacking, saving us for a while. Preacher is our first creature, but it isn't for fighting. Instead, we can tap him to persuade the opponent to give us one of their creatures. This will be a running theme of the deck. Always assume the opponent will have better creatures than we will, so let's steal them. Reverse damage does just that, converts damage taken into life gain. Righteousness is an instant giving a creature 7/7 for the turn, necessary for comebacks and combat upsets. Sarah Angel is our first real creature. Yes, this flying 4/4 Vigilance Angel is the best creature in the color I could get. It's also super iconic, and running white kinda needs one if we're being honest. Shahrazad is an obnoxious but hilarious card that makes you play an entire Magic subgame just to determine life loss in the primary game. It's banned, but it's also Richard Garfield's favorite card design, so it stays. Swords to Plowshares is desperate removal and is still a great card even today. Thunder Spirit is a decent 2/2 flying first strike spirit for 3 mana. Wall of Swords can't attack, however it can block flying creatures and repel attacks as a 3/5. And finally, Wrath of God is mass creature destruction. Playing white is risky as there's not a lot to help you win the game, but plenty to cause havoc and stall while the other colors get the job done. Well, that is assuming they even can. Next up, let's look at blue. Air Elemental, just like Sarah Angel, deserves an inclusion purely for being part of the 3 generic 2-color creature cycle of Alpha. Also, blue won't have a lot of creatures either, fair warning. Ancestral Recall. Yep, here's the first of the Power 9, allowing us to draw 3 cards for a single blue mana. Auto include. Brain Geyser is also great for card draw, even if it takes 5 mana just to match Ancestral Recall. Clone is one of many ways to acquire strong creatures, assuming that modern decks have better creatures than us, because they obviously will. Clone allows us to carbon copy an opponent's creature and use it for our own purposes. Copy Artifact does the same, but for an artifact. Now this time we might actually want to copy ourselves to duplicate a Black Lotus or Mox Jewel if the opponent doesn't have anything too fancy. Counterspell is necessary to keep us safe from modern problems for a while, literally countering 1 spell. Drain Power sucks all of our opponent's mana into our own mana pool for us to spend. This used to be risky while playing with Mana Burn, as unspent mana would cost you 1 life each at the end of the turn. True nostalgic masochists can play it authentically. Mana Drain counters a spell and allows us the spell's casting cost as mana to spend next turn. Mana Short is practically giving us a free turn, tapping and draining all of an opponent's mana. Old Man of the Sea is basically Preacher, however he's a 2/3, and we get to choose which of the opponent's creatures we kidnap, so long as their power is no greater than 2. Many commanders don't even have power 3 or greater. Serendib Ifrit is a cheap yet powerful 3/4 flyer that's only downside is a 1 damage per turn knockback, which in Commander is not a big deal. Stasis is a stacks nightmare, preventing the untap phase. When played correctly, it could result in us getting free turns for as long as we can afford the upkeep cost. Time Walk is yet another busted Power 9 card, giving us a free turn for 2 mana. Time Twister is the last of the blue Power 9, giving us a cheap emergency reset of our hand and graveyard if necessary. Vesuvan Doppelganger is clone, but for 1 more mana, it gets the bonus ability to keep changing if something better comes along to copy. And that's blue. Lots of card draw, countering, and powerful shenanigans, but once again, this is relying on twisting the opponent's deck against itself. For a more direct approach, we might need to look to our next color, black. Animate Dead lets us snag a creature with -1 to its power right from an opponent's graveyard. We could grab from our own, but I mean, have you seen our creatures? Dance of the Dead is pretty much the same card, but instead of the -1, we get +1/+1, and the downside of needing to pay 1 and a black to untap the creature. That's a big whatevs, considering this card only costs 2 mana like Animate Dead does. Dark Ritual turns 1 swamp into 3. I've always loved this card, so I've got to include it. Darkness is Holy Day or Fog, but in black. Demonic Tutor lets us search our library for exactly what we need for the situation, and boy does this deck have a lot of utility. Drudge Skeletons are another classic favorite of mine, giving us theoretically an invincible 1/1 for 1 black a turn. Hypnotic Spectre is a flying 2/2 that forces an opponent to discard if it scores a direct hit. Juzam Jin is a huge 5/5 creature for 4 mana, dealing 1 damage to us each turn because he's a dick. Lord of the Pit is a metal as hell 7/7 flying trampled demon demanding creature sacrifice each turn or else he'll hit us in retaliation. Swing wildly with him for quick devastating chaos, cause we're likely never paying that cost anyway. Mind Twist forces the opponent to discard a huge number of cards, easily forcing them to top deck. Oubliette traps an opponent's creature in a satisfyingly gruesome way. It ends up being decent removal with haunting artwork. Royal Assassin may be just a 1/1 creature, but with the tap ability to destroy any tapped creature, it discourages any advancement from the opponent. Sengir Vampire is the 4/4 flying alpha beast that sucks the blood of its victims, gaining +1/+1 for each creature it kills. The Wretched is a deceptively amazing overlooked card. It's a 2/5 creature that basically kidnaps any creatures that block it. Not only does it contribute to stealing the opponent's creatures, its beefy 5 toughness makes it hard to put down, but lousy 2 power also means that it might just deal 2 damage every turn. Word of Command is a weird card that lets you take over the opponent for a moment and force them to play something, be it harmful to their own creatures or to set up summoning an expensive one just for us to steal next turn. Played right, it's a black extra turn. And that's all for black. There was definitely more to discover of worth in vintage black than I expected. We had a decent mix of creatures and utility this time. Those in conjunction with white and blue would be Chromium's deck foundation, and I think it's pretty solid. So let's take a look at my green includes and hope that the next batch is just as good. Berserk gives one creature double power and trample, but destroys it at the end of combat. However, it could be used on an opponent's creature as 1 green mana removal at the expense of, getting clobbered for a turn. Birds of Paradise is a green icon, a flying 0/1 that can be tapped for any color of mana. Cockatrice is the green creature of the alpha big creature cycle. It's a 2/4 flyer with an early form of Death Touch that works on everything except walls, which are unlikely to exist in any of our opponent's decks. Crawworm is the real alpha giant green creature, and a nice change of pace from all the later big creatures with drawbacks. It's a 6/4 for 4 generic and 2 green. Simple and strong. Urnam Jin is a 4/5 creature with 1 such drawback. It gives an opponent's creature Forest Walk, and since we need green to cast it, that means it's unblockable. Picking the small stuff, we could make this trade-off worth it in the long run. Eureka is a bonkers card that allows you and your opponent to alternate playing cards for free until someone decides not to. We can't make a deck this old without the completely crazy cards making it in. Fog is yet another combat damage nullifier to keep us alive. If Biff Ifrit is a 3/3 flyer with a weird drawback. Any player may pay green to have it deal 1 damage to each player and each flying creature. If the opponent has no green, it's not a drawback at all. Kesa is a surprisingly underrated card, all due to some poor wording. She's a 2/3 for 3 generic and 2 green, but buffs all green creatures with +1/+1, and all includes Kesa, so she's actually a 3/4 buffing everyone, and her art is awesome. Living Plane turns all lands in play into 1/1 creatures, and stops all lands from tapping for mana on their first turn. It's risky, but changes how you look at your board. Llanowar Elves is another green auto-include, as a 1/1 that taps for green for only 1 green. Scarwood Bandits are a 2/2 Forest Walk creature that can pay to take an opponent's artifact, once again assuming their stuff is just going to be better than our stuff. Untamed Wilds is the closest we're going to get to having ramp, grabbing us a basic land from our deck and putting it into play. Wall of Brambles is a regenerating 2/3 wall. Walls were surprisingly prominent in early Magic, so having a few felt right. Willow Satyr can basically steal legendary creatures from the opponent one at a time, so long as we return one to grab another. Pretty useful to simply steal the opponent's commander. You'd be surprised how hard it was to find good green creatures and ramp in early Magic. At least this batch made for a solid inclusion for the green Elder Dragons. So now let's finally move on to red. Aladdin isn't legendary since the Legend set came out after Arabian Nights, so theoretically you could have multiple Aladdins on the field at once, like he's a species. Anyway, he's another 1/1 who can pay to steal artifacts. Unlike the other stealing cards, Aladdin can steal multiple artifacts so long as we pay 1 generic and 2 mountains. Ali from Cairo is another non-legendary character with a crazy ability. Any damage that would reduce our life to less than 1 reduces it to 1 instead, turning us invincible for as long as we keep this 0/1 creature alive. Blood Moon is a nasty troll card, turning all non-basic land cards into mountains. This doesn't really hurt us much, but can devastate opponent strategies. Disharmony lets us persuade an attacking creature to turn to our side to block, potentially killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Dragon Whelp is an iconic 2/3 flyer that can be pumped up to 3 times with +1/+0s. Fire Elemental is a huge 5/4 with no downsides, which is kinda rare in early Magic. Fireball hurls X damage wherever, and paying for more targets however we want. Keldon Warlord is an XX creature where X is the amount of non-wall creatures on our side. That's how prominent walls were. Lightning Bolt is a go-to red spell, launching 3 damage for a single mountain. Mana Barbs deals 1 point of damage to the controller of each land as they tap. Could destroy some faster decks than ours outright. Orcish Oriflame buffs our attacking creatures with +1/+0. Yes, that's a lot in early Magic. It truly doesn't get much better. That's why Kesa was so good by comparison. Shivan Dragon is the original 5/5 flying dragon that can be pumped with +1/+0s of its own, but unlike Dragon Whelp, there is no limit to how many times we do this. Uthden Troll is a regenerating 2/2 creature for protection. Wall of Stone is also great for protection, reaching all the way up to being a 0/8. Wheel of Fortune is another Chaos card, forcing all players to discard and draw a new 7-card hand. Great for devious schemes. And that was 15 of each color. So far to build our deck, we select an Elder Dragon, take its 3 colors, and shuffle up. But first we need some land. Luckily, there is just barely enough unique artwork and basic land in 1996 Magic to let us have 10 of each color. Here's a quick look at the various artwork of each land type before we move on to the non-basics. You'll notice that all but Mountain has a white bordered card in here. That's because in Arabian Nights there was a Mountain card printed, but none of the other mana sources. So I decided to go to Unlimited and grab a white bordered card just because they printed some different art in them, and the rest of the deck has black borders. So, well, that's just a price we have to pay. Honestly, I love this old artwork, so I don't really mind. Now, since Alpha was completely unbalanced, and can you blame them, we have dual lands of every 2-color pair to add to our decks. That makes 10 more cards. These dual lands are some of the most sought-after cards in the entire history of the game, so their power will certainly aid in ramping up our 1996 deck. In addition to these, there's a single set of 5 2-color lands I'd like to also grab from Ice Age. This set also enters untapped, taps for colorless for free, but costs 1 life to colorize its mana into one of 2 options each. Good for keeping up the pace and for desperate color fixing. While we're at it, let's also add a 5-land cycle from Mirage. They enter tapped, but can be sacrificed to bring out one of 2 color basic lands into play. Though slower, these allow us some better control of our mana sources. Lastly, let's add 2 more lands of note that every Elder Dragon will run. First up is City of Brass. It taps for any color of mana at the expense of 1 life each time it is used. And the Tabernacle at Pendril Vale, which is a legendary land that states all creatures now have an upkeep cost of 1. If the cost is not paid, the creature is destroyed. This can keep opponents with wide-reaching armies under control, something the rest of our deck can't exactly handle. Now let's add the cards I know you've been thinking of this entire time. Let's move on to Artifacts, where some of the biggest bombs of our deck get to shine. For the record, our deck plan uses 177 cards total, but for printing purposes, we were allowed 180. So there are 3 bonus artifacts in here for us to add or remove based on our play preference. Basalt Monolith comes out for 3 and allows us to tap it for 3. Now, untapping requires another payment of 3, but this allows us to stockpile mana for future turns. Black Lotus is an obvious include. This 0-drop artifact can be sacrificed to add 3 of any 1-color mana to our mana pool. You might have heard that this card is a little expensive. Fun fact. Chaos Orb is the true definition of chaos. You must flip and drop it onto the playing area to destroy anything it lands on. Hilarious and totally 90s. Felloar Stone is a 2-mana rock that taps for 1 mana of any color an opponent's land may produce. Since we're playing a 3-color deck, the odds are in our favor that we can use this mana, even against a monocolor deck. Force Field allows us to cushion attacking creature blows by losing 1 damage for each unblocked creature paid for 1 mana at a time. Howling Mine lets all players draw 2 cards during their upkeeps. Risky, but definitely speeds things up. Icy Manipulator lets us pay 1 mana to tap anything in play. With enough mana, this thing could shut down our opponent every single turn all by itself. Juggernaut is the strong 5/3 that attacks each turn if possible, but can't be stopped by walls. No, we don't need it as a wall counter, but a strong creature for 4 mana? Sign me up. Mana Vault costs 1, but taps for 3 colorless mana. But from then on, it needs to be paid 4 mana to untap it, or else it damages us at 1 life per upkeep. Great for emergencies. Meek Stone states that any creature with power greater than 2 cannot be untapped during the untap phase. A nasty surprise after a devastating attack. Mox Emerald comes out for free and taps for 1 green mana. Yep, you knew they were coming. The famous Mox Cycle is the Power 9's iconic overpowered jewelry collection. Mox Jet is the same but for black mana. These cards don't count as land, so they come out for free and permanently put us a turn ahead. Mox Pearl is the same but for white mana. Honestly, I think these should be considered to be more powerful than the Black Lotus. Mox Ruby is the same but for red mana. Think about it, if you get this turn 1, you're already so unfairly far ahead the opponent will be playing catch-up all game. Mox Sapphire is the same, but for blue mana. And they're all pretty sleek looking, to be honest. I should get pendants of these things or something. Oh, right, where was I? Nevinyrral's Disc is basically telling your opponent you have a bomb. For 1 mana, you can blow up all creatures, enchantments, and artifacts in play. Don't test me. Soul Ring, you probably know well from Modern Commander, adding 2 colorless while only costing 1 to drop. Great value for ramping up our side. Winter Orb is an evil card that only allows players 1 land to untap each turn. Slows games down big time or forces you to try to win the game with whatever's left on the table. Great after we just stole the opponent's board. Now, to avoid our deck from needing a ridiculous amount of cards that need cycling each time we switch commanders, I decided to add only 2 multicolor cards for each 3-color set and no 2-color cards at all. There's also not too many good multicolor cards to begin with at this point in Magic's history, so going in order of the Dragon's color pairs, let's take a look at my choices for the multicolor cards that I did decide to add. For Bant, Felidgriff was an easy choice. Not because it's particularly great, even though for this deck it kind of is, but because it is such a hilarious card. The extra abilities are also funny, mostly helping the opponent more than it's helping us, but a 4/4 for 4 mana is still pretty good. Storm Spirit does cost 6 mana, but finding a decent creature is really hard in early Magic, and this one's a 3/3 flyer that can be tapped to deal 2 damage to target creature. Not bad. For Esper, Halfdane is normally a 3/3 creature that can match another creature's power and toughness during your upkeep. It's a nice modular creature for our modular deck when we assume the opponent is always going to have the better creatures. Mariki Reberit, if I even said that right, can be tapped to steal an opponent's creature. Fits perfectly in our deck. Gwendolyn de Courcy is a 3/5 that can tap to force an opponent to discard. Also, this questionable art got this card put on Magic's naughty list and quietly forgotten. I'm just wondering why this prostitute is so frickin' powerful. Solkanar the Swamp King is a 5-mana creature for a 5/5 Swamp Walk. What's the downside? He gives us 1 life for each black spell we cast. Wait, that's his downside? Yep, auto-include for that reason alone. For Naya, we have Hazion Tamar, who is a 2/4 who summons a whole bunch of 1/1 Sand Warrior tokens based on how much land we have. And he costs 7 mana himself to summon, so it's likely to be a lot. Downside is they all vanish if he dies. Jacques Levertz is a 3/4 for 4 mana who, like Kesa, accidentally said all when he meant other when buffing green creatures with 0/2, meaning he's actually a 3/4. On to Jund, Bartel Runeaxe is a monstrous 6/5 for 6 mana. His only flaw is having vigilance and the inability of being enchanted. We aren't enchanting anyway, so this is basically free protection. And Zira Arian is a 3-mana Wasp Queen who taps for Jund to allow us to draw a card. She's also a 1/2 flyer if it really comes down to it. So let's go over how to switch up this huge pile of cards. Each variation of this deck will have 1 commander out of 5 options, 15 cards of each of the 3 colors chosen, 10 artifacts excluding 3 of our choice, 3 Mox Jewels based on the colors chosen, 9 non-basic lands that work under our color parameters, 10 of each land of the 3 colors chosen, and 2 multicolor cards that match our commander's color identity, totaling 100 cards exactly. Totaling up all the extra cards needed for this modulation, we end up with 180 cards total. Now finally, with all that out of the way, how does it actually hold up against a modern commander deck? This is either going to be an absolute slaughter, or maybe, just maybe, this crazy deck might just work. But it'll have to wait till next video. Sorry, but the scope of this video has already gone way longer than I originally planned, so keep an eye out for those upcoming games using this modular deck. If you'd like to view the deck digitally, check out the links in the description for Archidect, where I built it, first as a proof of concept for Chromium, then in a second deck as the remainder of the missing cards. Thank you so much for joining me on this adventure into vintage Magic, and remember to like the video and subscribe to see how those upcoming matches play out, and I'll see you in the next video. Boop!